So the next thing I want to talk about are factors. This is the other word. First we had terms, and now we have factors. A factor is a noun, and these are quantities that are multiplied, or a single quantity. So terms are added, or a single quantity. Factors are multiplied, or a single quantity. So notice there's some overlap there. Single quantity can be thought of as a term or a factor. It can be a term, think of it this way, you can think of it as a term plus 0, or you can think of it as a factor times 1. The same thing as a factor or term. Okay, so these are some examples of factors. Here I have this number, it's actually 24. I have written it as a product of 3 factors, 2 times 3 times 4. That's 6 times 4, 24, right? So 2 is a factor, 3 is a factor, 4 is a factor. It's things that are being multiplied. 2/5, the things being multiplied are 2 and 1/5. So 2 is a factor of 1/5. 2 is a factor of 2/5, and 1/5 is a factor of 2/5. 2xy over 3z. Now, just like with terms, you can look at the main thing, or you can look at a like a smaller level. Look at the expression in the smaller level, which in this case is numerator, denominator. So I've got 2x and y are factors of the numerator, right? And 3 and z are factors of the denominator. Now, 2x and y are also factors of the whole thing. But 3 is not a factor of the whole thing. 3 is only a factor of the denominator. 1/3 is a factor of the whole thing, as is 1 over z. Okay? So usually, if we're talking about factors of this whole expression, usually we would most often be thinking of the numerators. Some of you might think it's a little strange to have 1/3 as a factor because it's not an integer, but factors don't necessarily have to be integers. Most of the time in algebra, though, when we talk about factors of a known number, we are talking about integers. Okay, so x equals 2. X is a factor of the left side of the equation. 2 is a factor of the right side of the equation. Think of it as 2 times 1 or x times 1, right? Or just think of it as a single quantity. A single quantity is a factor. It's also a term, right? X is a term of the left, 2 is a term of the right, x is a factor of the left, 2 is a factor of the right. Factors can be grouped in different ways, and it's important to be able to see this and to be able to do this. So if I've got 2xy, I can think of 2 and x and y as factors of that, like I did in this first one. Or I could think of 2x as one factor and y as a second factor. Or I can think of 2 as one factor and xy as a second factor. Or I could think of x as one of the factors and 2y as the other factor. So I'm factoring these into 2 different things, which we do quite a lot in algebra. Or I can think of the whole thing, 2xy, as a factor, a single quantity, right? 18, I can write it as factors as 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. This is very commonly done. We very commonly want to take an integer and factor it as a product of 2 integers. So 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6 are the 3 different ways you can factor 18 using positive integers with 2 factors each. Now there's another thing which is called prime factorization. You'd break this down into all the primes that it can be written as a product of. So that would be 2 times 3 times 3, because 9's not a prime. Prime is an integer that's divisible only by 1 in itself. So it has no other factors other than 1 in itself, positive integer factors. Okay, so we do this quite a lot, so you have to be able, when you see 18, you need to be able to see it as 1 times 18, 2 times 9, or 3 times 6 without too much trouble, or you'll have a really hard time with algebra. Now, negative 3 you can think of as negative 1 times 3. Or you could think of it as 1 times negative 3, or just negative 3. Those are the different ways of writing it as factors. 2x over 3y, this whole expression is a factor of the left side of this thing. 2/3 times x over y. Here I've written this thing as 2 factors. One is 2/3 and the other is x over y. Right? Factors are things that are multiplied. So 2 over y is a factor. X over 3 is a factor. I'm just writing it. We say we're factoring this. We're writing it in terms of factors in different ways. 2, this can also be written as 2, with 2 as a factor, and the other factor being x over 3y. Or you can write it as 1/3, with the other factor being 2x over y. And of course, you can break it into more than 2 factors if you want. So here's 4 factors: 2x, 1/3, and 1 over y. So that's this expression broken into 4 factors. And you have to be able to understand this. So if you find that confusing up to that point, go back and look at this again and make sure you got it clear in your mind.